in the silver mirrors of your eyes.
Well, zip that little pointer right on down to the letter G.
Here I am.
Where are you? Are you here? You're scaring me with this!
I started to meet with Michael. Actually, Michael had a different movie called Heat that he had written that he was thinking of producing and having somebody else direct while he went off and did Manhunter. And the more I talked to him about Heat, the more he decided, I think, that he thought I might be right for Manhunter.
I got called for the audition. They kept me waiting for a really long time. And they put this young woman with me to read, and I started to read the scene where I talk about, where I'm showing the slides, and I started talking to this woman, and she seemed really frightened. And as she started to feel frightened, I started to feel this feeling of this power. And Michael was over behind me, and I could feel him get up and start to walk around, and I could feel him. And so as I started to scare her more, he started to get more excited, and I started to feel like this person.
It was just the traditional way of getting the script from my agent and reading it and going in and reading for Michael Mann.
I mean, there were all kinds of people up for it. There was Brian Dennehy was being considered, John Lithgow, Mandy Patinkin. And of course, these were all Americans, and I was a Brit. Michael finally decided to go with me. I've got a theory about that, which is the fact is that anybody that's too clever has to be a little bit nasty, and therefore has to be played by a European.
At the time, we were calling it Red Dragon. That I think they were afraid the audience was going to think that it was a karate movie.
I think there was a lot of dialogue on the set about what it should be called.
Manhunter sounds like, I don't know, it's a very cheesy title in many ways. Manhunter, you know, Manhunter.
We did a lot of research. I worked with the Violent Crimes Unit of the Chicago Police Department, and then I went to Quantico and hung out with some of the FBI guys.
I went to the one of the Blind Institute or something in New York and met with some blind people, and I actually had a woman take me out on the street with a mask over my eyes to replicate what it would feel like to be blind.
Bundy was kind of currently in the news at that time, who murdered his way across America, particularly college girls.
I got a book on serial killer, and I started to read it, and I started feeling bad. I started feeling like, I don't like this.
Actually, I was more influenced by, as a kid growing up in Scotland, there was a guy called Peter Manuel. He, for about a year, created mayhem, where he murdered 2 families and raped several young girls, shot and killed a taxi driver. Manuel was extraordinary because he had no sense of right or wrong, and he had a kind of absence.
I remember asking one FBI agent in particular at Quantico how he managed to do this and be able to go home. He had 3 kids and a wife at home in Maryland. I said, how are you able to do this? How are you able to see this and have to sort of become this and then go home to your family in the suburbs? And he said, you just train yourself to stop. You know, you just train yourself to turn it off.
I suppose sanity is about boundaries that we create for ourselves in order for civilized behavior. And once you remove those boundaries, you become uncivilized and diabolic, as clearly Lecter is.
I wanted to feel that this guy was doing the best he could, that he was doing this out of love, and that he was trying to do the right thing. And that's what I wanted to have drive the character and not feel like there's something wrong with me.
Because I did about 6 weeks of research, and at a certain point, Michael said, you know what? You need to stop doing this, because at a certain point you become a little inured to it. And he wanted to make sure that that didn't happen, because my character has to sort of deal with a very emotional, fine line between being able to do it and not being able to do it.
And in the Nuremberg trials, they described evil as an absence of empathy. And evil seems to me to be something which is absent rather than something which is present. And that's what struck me about Lecter, was the fact that he was a very intelligent man, but he had completely no moral sense whatsoever. The reason you caught me, Will, is you're just alike. You want the scent.
It's a double-edged sword. He's able to do something so well, but the act of doing that makes him sick.
There's a big dance between them. And Will has been infected by Lecter.
What are they? Are they the same? Are they different?
Do you have any problems, Will?
No.
No. Will deals ostensibly in evil. He has to remove those barriers and then be able to put them back up in order to understand how the criminal mentality works, how Lecter works in terms of his psyche. Now, doing that is dangerous, especially if you're not equipped to put the barriers back up. Lecter recognizes that. He recognizes that this thing is bigger than Will and that he's taking on something which is dangerous. Would you like to leave me your home phone number?
No. There was something going on underneath that was really, really quite fascinating. And Brian's such a brilliant actor that, you just get it all right there. It was affecting. You'd walk out of that affected. We'd walk out of those takes, in some sort of other place. It was very collaborative between the actors, Dante, who was shooting it, and Michael.
You came here to look at me, to get the old scent back again, didn't you?
I want your opinion.
I don't have one right now.
Well, when you have one, I'd like to hear it.
I just did it every which way possible. My bias was always to be a little bit more hidden, a little bit more unrevealed. And I think eventually, that's what showed up in the dailies as being the stronger way of playing the scene. I mean, I played it broader, I played it louder, I played it more forceful, I played it more violent. We just really played around with it. For 3 days we worked on it, which is a long time on one scene.
We listened to each other. And by listening to each other and trusting each other, this sort of thing happened, which is compelling and repelling at the same time.
The other sequence where I'm on the phone to Liv, that time was a Stevie Wonder song called I Just Called to Say I Love You, And I wanted to start it off by singing this song to Will. And Michael thought this was a great idea, and we did it, but unfortunately there was all kinds of rights problems. Dream much, Will? Goodbye, Dr. Lecter.
He's incredibly focused. I mean, he's laser focused. His preparation is immense, which is why I don't think he does movies very often. He literally takes years to create a film. Michael's a wonderful director. I had a great time working with him. I mean, he has such energy and such vitality, and really, really is very supportive of his actors.
Well, Michael's fascinating. He's a very obsessive guy. I mean, I find him slightly comical in his obsession. I'm no disrespect, Michael.
I feel connected to him. But I barely know him. And that's the job of a director, is to inspire the people that he works with, to make them feel what he's feeling. And Michael's really great at that. He's the kind of director, though, he could shoot like 20 hours a day and sleep 4 hours and come back and shoot. I mean, crew members were like keeling over left and right. 18 hours is nothing to him. 18 takes is nothing to him.
He's just so meticulous, Michael. So he kept saying, try this, or we'll go down this road.
The stuff with Stephen Lang was the second stuff we shot, so I was really wound up.
And it was wonderful. It was wonderful to have the kind of luxury, actually.
I was doing like 50 push-ups between each take, like doing take after take after take.
There is no end to Michael's work.
He just loves what he does.
Wants what he wants, and he will get what he wants from you.
He really gets the performance in tone with the rest of the look of the movie.
And he also likes to see how far you and he can go.
And, you start to appreciate it when you start to realize the results that you get.
The whole film is about horror implied as opposed to horror explained. And that's Michael's strength.
Michael one day asked me, is there anything we can do to help you do this better? And I said, well, it'd be great if I didn't have to see anybody in the cast that is either after me or who I'm after until the scene happens.
I never interacted with Tom Noonan at all. He didn't want to meet me during the shooting of the movie.
Michael sent out a memo to the cast and everybody in the production that no one was to see me, ever. That I was not to be, I traveled on different airlines, I stayed at different hotels, and they all had to talk to me also as Francis. But it created this atmosphere on the set where people were frightened of me.
He did approach me and talk to me because his character did, and we worked together. That was the deal, that we were co-workers. So in his way, every actor has their own way of doing things, you know, and in his way we had a relationship and we knew each other, and he felt it was copacetic for him to actually have a conversation with me.
Because I would be on the set, and if he had to come on to shoot something, they would take me off the set and then they'd bring Tom on.
Again, I'd never met Billy until he came through the window.
And then on the last night when we shot the climax, we worked all night long with him, and I didn't talk to him in between takes. When it was all over, he and I went out to breakfast.
They decided they were going to have, actually, William Blake's Red Dragon. They would make a tattoo of it, and it would be on my front and back. These guys would draw on me all day long, like for days and days and weeks and weeks. After the end of a whole day of like laying there, they would bring me to Michael, and Michael would look at it and go, "Oh, you gotta move this here," and he would take the pen and start drawing all over me, and then I'd go back to this room the next day, and they would draw on me again for like 6 hours, 7 hours. And they started shooting the movie with this on me. One day he came to me and said, "I think the tattoo trivializes your struggle, and we're not going to use it."
Take my word for it. I'm smiling.
The whole purpose of what I was doing in the movie as a character was to be connected to people.
He was this, you know, kind of nice guy that she liked and felt some attraction for.
She was able to touch the wound in me in some way that I would not allow anybody else to do so.
I saw the character as somebody who wasn't necessarily very prudish, I guess. I didn't think she was promiscuous, but I thought she was being in this, you know, tactile world of, you know, having to, like I said, use her hands and stuff. I thought that she was very connected to her body.
Like after the night when we first sleep together, and I take her hand and put it on my cleft lip, it's like somehow, because she was blind, maybe, or the way she spoke, something about that touched me, and I let her in like I would never let anybody else.
Whether that would be, you know, translate into a long-term relationship, I didn't really think that the character necessarily thought that.
But again, when I shut down to her, I shut down pretty hard.
It was a very serious set. But again, the material was very serious. As the weeks went by, we became more and more into that, and I think the crew did as well. And it was very quiet.
Michael would really push people. He would really push to get what he wanted, and people were very confronted by that.
And I think that's Michael. I mean, I think that's what Michael believes. I mean, Michael, that's what film is for him. On some level, it's sacred.
People worked really hard, and there was a lot of night shooting, so that can also be a little disorienting.
I would sit in the dark in my trailer. Like Michael would come to my trailer if there was a long setup, and he'd see the lights out, and he'd knock on the door, and he said, "Can I come in, Francis?" And I said, "Okay." And he would come in, and he'd sit in the dark with me, and we'd just sit there.
And he was very sad when the movie was going to be over. Everybody else, I think the crew members were all like going, "Oh my God, we can't stand up anymore."
Toward the end of the shoot, and I know that they were running into time problems, and you know, so I remember that being really crazy.
Yeah, everybody left. The crew was all leaving. They were burned out. It was guerrilla filmmaking. It was filmmaking 101, you know, and especially the last night where it really all happened because he wanted it to be in sequence.
It was real glass jars of ketchup and mustard and things like that. And Michael was kind of like smashing pieces and placed Bill in the center of this, and then needed Bill to fall into the frame. And Bill got a nice big old piece of glass caught right in his thigh.
They had me in that pool of blood, and they left me there for, you know, like for hours, literally, because they had to shoot other scenes. They weren't sure they were going to come back and get a close-up of that. So I was in this sticky stuff that over the night, they couldn't get me off the floor when they came. I was stuck to the floor.
We didn't have some of the special effects guys. You know, they'd left, and so we were creating stuff at the time with the shooting of the gun and the spattering of the blood. It was all being done like sort of with guys with hoses like and ketchup going, you know, on the wall.
It was a little wild, I think, but also very enjoyable, as I recall.
Michael was in you know, it was like a playground for him all of a sudden. It was like, oh, I have no idea how to do this. I don't have all this stuff, so we'll just do it like this. We'll do it like that. It's odd. When we got done with the film, I had a play to do at my theater back in Chicago. And for the month and a half before we opened the play, I kept trying to rehearse the play and trying to play this new character, and I couldn't. He was always coming out Will Graham. And one day I woke up and I said, I can't get rid of this guy. And I went into a hairdresser and I had him dye my hair blonde, just so that I would look in the mirror and see a different person. And at the time I thought maybe a lot of it had to do with just it was a rigorous shoot. But ultimately it had creeped in.
And somebody rang me up from a newspaper, and one of the papers in England, and said, is it true that you were the first Hannibal Lecter? And I said, yes, I was. And then of course the headline went in the paper, I was the first Hannibal Lecter, as though this was something I was protesting about. You can say, oh, this was my part, I should be playing it. I mean, you get actors who do that. I think that's bollocks. The only thing that I regret is the money. I'm very pleased with what I did, and I'm very pleased with the film I was in.
You know, it's one of these movies that I think people have found over the years and embraced.
And I find sort of this whole Manhunter subculture existing, that people who have just, it's literally like one of their favorite films. And I tend to run into that with journalists and film critics as well.
Most horror movies, they build the tension up and then they find a way to release it. But in this movie, it's unrelenting and it's kind of calm. There's no release, there's no like frightening moment.
All of the guys that I've talked to in the profession find it incredibly valid and stimulating.
There's something very real about making a movie about something that horrible and making it human. You know, not trying to play it up and not, because that's life.